How does a national policy connect to a little boy's hat? It sounds kind of like a riddle, doesn't it? Well, today we're going to try and solve it. We're going to look at a huge, complex issue through the eyes of one small child, and then dive into a psychological framework that might just explain the why behind it all. So, let's get into it. Let's just start with the words of a 5-year-old boy. He says, "I'm 5, I can count to 100, tie my shoes, and name every single Avenger. What I can't do is explain why men with guns took me from my driveway after school." That single, powerful question from Liam Conejo Ramos, well, that's where this whole story begins. Why? It's the simplest question and, honestly, the hardest one to answer. To even try, we have to pull the camera back, way back, from one family's driveway to the bigger picture. So let's just lay out the story of Liam Conejo Ramos. It's really important to get this straight. According to the article we're looking at, his family did everything by the book. They were going through the legal asylum process, had their papers, went to their hearings, they were doing everything right. And then, one afternoon in Minnesota, their whole world was turned upside down. Just look at this timeline. It's staggering. On January 20th, he's at his home in Minnesota. The very next day, he's 1,300 miles away in a detention center in Texas. Can you even imagine that? A 5-year-old, ripped away from everything he knows, from his pregnant mom, and it all happens in about a day. He ends up spending almost 2 weeks there before a judge finally steps in and orders his release.
So what was it like inside this place? Well, the reports are pretty grim. Lights that were always on, so you never knew if it was day or night. Thin blankets that reeked of chemicals. And the food? Some people said it had mold and worms in it. But the detail that just stops you in your tracks is this one. Liam, a 5-year-old boy, gets a fever. His dad asks for medicine. And the answer? We don't have any. In a facility with 400 kids, no medicine. It's just hard to wrap your head around.
You know, through this whole terrifying ordeal, Liam's world boiled down to just 3 questions, and they are just absolutely heartbreaking. Where's Mama? When can I go back to school? And where is my hat? It's everything a kid needs, right? His mom, his normal life, and something that's his, something that makes him feel like himself. In his case, it was a simple bunny hat. Okay, so we have the what, a little boy taken from his home. Now for the why. And to get there, we have to shift gears completely. We're going to look at another source, a book called Inside Leader's Mind. Now, this book doesn't talk about Liam directly, but it offers a psychological framework that might just help us understand the kind of thinking that leads to policies like the one that swept him up.
The author, Chris Bureve, has a really interesting way of framing it. He says the book isn't about judging Donald Trump, it's about documenting his system. Think of it like a user manual. You know, if you press this button, you get this result. The book argues that the leader's behavior isn't random. It's a predictable system with specific inputs and outputs.
So how does he do this? He calls his method psychological archaeology, and that's a great way to think about it. You know how an archaeologist carefully brushes away layers of dirt to find out what happened in the past? Well, this method tries to do the same thing with a person's life, digging backward from their adult behavior, layer by layer, to find the childhood wounds and experiences that, according to the book, built the very foundation of who they are today. Now, this is a really, really important point the author makes, and we need to be clear about it too. The book's guiding principle is this: understanding is not excusing, it is predicting. So this whole analysis isn't about feeling sorry for anyone or making excuses. It's about trying to recognize a pattern to predict future behavior. That's the lens for everything that follows. Okay, let's dig in. What did this psychological archaeology unearth? Well, the book argues it all comes down to a single, brutal command from his father, Fred Trump: be a killer. The message was simple. In this world, you are either a killer or you are a loser. There is absolutely no middle ground. And to see this in action, the book points to the story of the 2 Trump sons, which it frames as a sort of cautionary tale. You had Freddie, the older brother. He didn't want the family business. He wanted to be a pilot. And for that, the book says he was mocked, disowned, and ultimately destroyed by his own father. And then you had Donald. He saw what happened to his brother and learned a harsh lesson. To get his father's love and approval, he couldn't be Freddie. He had to be the killer. And look, this isn't just some wild theory the author cooked up. He backs it up with sources, including this absolutely devastating quote from Donald Trump's own niece, Mary Trump, who, by the way, is a clinical psychologist herself. She says, "Donald destroyed my father." She puts the blame right at his feet and her grandfather's. Okay, so here's the leap the book makes.
It argues that these intense family lessons didn't just stay within the family. They became a kind of operating system, a repeatable playbook for how to deal with any challenge, any opponent, first in business and then, as we all saw, in politics.
And this right here is the playbook. The book says it was taught to him by his mentor, the notorious lawyer Roy Cohn. Yeah, that Roy Cohn. And the strategy is pretty straightforward, especially when you're cornered. Step 1, go on the attack. Attack your accusers. Step 2, deny everything. Doesn't matter if there's evidence, just deny it. 3, intimidate them with a massive countersuit. 4, settle the case, but never, ever admit you did anything wrong. And the final step, step 5, claim you won. Total vindication. The book argues this became his go-to move for everything. All right, we've gone from a boy in Minnesota to a psychological blueprint forged in Queens decades ago. So, how in the world do these two things connect? Let's bring it all together.
This is the bridge. The book talks about these abstract psychological patterns. One is the dominance imperative, this deep-seated need to dominate and win no matter the cost. The other is a structural lack of empathy. And then you look at Liam's story, and you see the reported outcomes. You have a federal judge calling the policy that took Liam an imposition of cruelty and a quest for power. And that structural lack of empathy, well, what does that look like on the ground? Maybe it looks like a 5-year-old with a fever being denied medicine.
And we have to be really clear here, this isn't just about one little boy. The article points out that since January 2025, the number is at least 3,800. 3,800 children, including 20 babies, have been detained. That number, it just takes your breath away. It shows this is a massive, systemic issue, far bigger than just one story.
So, we've looked at the psychology, we've looked at the playbook, but the article we started with brings us right back to where we began. It pulls us away from the abstract analysis and forces us to confront the human cost, asking a much, much bigger question.
And the source poses that question through Liam's own voice. He asks, when you see a picture of a 5-year-old boy in a bunny hat, does that feel like strength? It's such a powerful question, right? It puts the image of this little kid right up against these big ideas of national strength and power, and it just forces you to ask, what do those words even mean?
And that leads to the final question the article leaves hanging in the air. A question that goes beyond policy, beyond psychology, and straight to the heart of the matter. After seeing all of this, the personal story, the political policy, the psychological framework, the question is turned back to us. Is this who we are?